Good to see you again. We're going to have a brief talk today. I want to give some real world examples of some actual teams that I coached or where we had really good Scrum Masters and great metrics. And you can see what predictability and velocity metrics, the kinds of things you should be looking for if the team is working effectively, or if it has some problems and what those problems could be. How do you use it to gain insights and improve the team? I'm going to try and make it brief. We'll see if I can be successful at that. Okay. All right. So in this first example, I want to show you how a really good Scrum Master handled his team and what you can see in the metrics. There are a few things I want you to clue into, first of all. The blue column that you see right over here, you see that? All right. That is your committed. That represents the number of points that the team's committed to in the sprint. All right. The orange column represents what they actually completed in the sprint. And this blue bar right here, the dotted line, is the percent complete that you're looking for. This is your predictability. It's a comparison between what you committed to and what you completed. The yellow dotted is your average velocity at the time of these metrics. Okay. Now, so you can see that this Scrum Master, very good Scrum Master, certified Scrum Master, certified coach, years of experience, really, really top notch at building a team, establishing a working agreement, getting the people to rally and work, collaborate together. Fantastic job. And what do we see? Well, we see sprint number 18, 100% success rate. Everything's fine. Sprint number 19, 89% success rate. The velocity is rising here. Okay. Now we're coming up to 46 and 106%. What you'll notice is that the team is not at 100% sprint over sprint. This shows that there is a little bit of variability, but the variability is controlled. All right. That's very important to look for. You should be a little suspicious of any team that has 100% every single time. And I'm going to show you an example of that in a minute. And every now and then you will have a sprint that's not great. This is an incomplete sprint. These are sprints that were in the future at the time this thing was taken. So just disregard that. So great Scrum Master, clear metrics. I can see very good predictability. All right. The standard deviation is low. Right. Also, superb Scrum Master, excellent Scrum Master. And I need to point out that at this point right here, Sprint 16, they had eliminated the entire employment of all of the contractors they had, and they started with the brand new contractors with Accenture. So these were new developers learning the code base, beginning to be familiar with the product, with the company, etc. So take that into account. And you'll notice that they started off with about 30 points, only completed about 15. In the retro, they figured some things out. They actually took on a little bit more, and they completed about as much as they had taken on in the first sprint. So they're a little bit, they're trying to stretch and learn what their limits are. Next sprint, look at this, 3 sprints in. Now they're actually completing over 80 points. This is a fairly large team, by the way, if you're wondering. I think there might have been 12 or 15 people on the team, probably closer to 12. That's why you're going to see some fairly large numbers there. Here they tried to push farther, and I think that's when they discovered, okay, I think we're running into a limitation. They came back closer to Sprint 18's level, stabilized. So you can see that the team is finding its rhythm, finding its cadence, and now they're stabilized. All right. Now, right about here, an interesting thing happened. We discovered that there probably was a better way of organizing the team. So we made some modifications and moved the folks who did the APIs into their own separate team for some very specific reasons. All right. Yes, we created a component team, and it's because there was a whole bunch of teams that were touching the APIs. And because they were all touching it in a disorganized manner, they were actually causing each other trouble. So by moving the governance of the APIs out to a team that specialized in the APIs, we were able to eliminate one of the problems, which was that everybody was in the code base modifying things, and it was kind of helter-skelter. I put some governance around it and ran into another problem, right? Now you had to coordinate across the teams. Any changes you had to make needed to be planned and brought to those teams and put into their backlog. So you'll notice that the velocity drops a little bit as they begin to learn how to coordinate across the teams. They stabilize. So you can see this predictability. Look at this, 105, 103, 111, 109, 97, 106. Very predictable. This excellent Scrum Master did a great job. And then we began to find ways of improving by automating testing, improving the coordination across the teams. And you'll notice that way over here, they ended up at 135 points average velocity. From a low, let's say down here where they stabilized, 64 to 135. They doubled the velocity. Does a Scrum Master bring a team value? Yes, a really good Scrum Master can make the team stable, predictable, happy, content, protect them from distractions, enable them to see opportunities for improvement. And ultimately, this was a very, very happy team. They loved their product owner, loved their Scrum Master. They were highly productive, and you can see that they doubled their velocity. So does that happen in the real world? Yes, it does, boys and girls. You can double your velocity, all right? And a Scrum Master plays a critical role in this. So to all the naysayers, you say Scrum Masters don't provide any value, boo to you. Yes, they do. All right, now, here's a team that I want you to look at a couple of other quick patterns here. Sprint 12, 100%. Sprint 13, 100%. Sprint 14, wow, you dropped all the way down to 8 points, but it's 100%. Why did you only plan 8 points? You see that pattern there? How is it 100%, 100%, 100%, 100%, 100%? Oh, what we discovered was the team and the Scrum Master were tinkering around with some processes that changed the way that the ALM recorded the points. They discovered that if you pulled stories out at the end of the sprint, before the sprint closed, and you just pushed them in the next sprint before you closed the sprint, then for some reason the ALM showed that, if all you had left in there was complete stories, then you were 100% successful. It was not treating the original stories that were in there that didn't get completed. It wasn't counting them into the metrics. This is one of the reasons why I had them go back out of the ALM, get out of Jira, and start tracking it in Excel, because I wanted the Scrum Masters to be more transparent. The tool was failing us, and the process was failing us, and so we started to look at it differently, right? And actually, I was gathering metrics on my own behind the scenes as I was coaching. So now what happened was, starting at this sprint 19, they had committed to 35 points, completed 25. Not bad, 77%. Okay, so you can see that they were doing okay, but then they ran into some really bad sprints. Look at these, all right? 44%, 61%. What was going on there, do you think? All right, so I checked. What we discovered was that there was a high level of churn. Fortunately, back in about sprint 18 and 19, in a conversation I had with the team and with the Scrum Master, they had stated that the product owner was changing scope within the sprint at a very high level. So we decided to start tracking what we called churn. This is stories that are brought in or removed from the sprint after you've committed, because we wanted to see, well, can we validate whether or not this is a large percentage of your scope? And as you'll see, in sprint 19, about 50%. So if they started off with 35 points, about 17 points pulled out, and then another 17 put in there. So after the team had refined and understood and discussed and planned and designed and gotten ready to work it, boom, they pulled that out and stuck something in there that they weren't able to do. And this is why now the team was starting to work longer hours, trying to get that work done and not delivering as much as they felt that they could. Okay. And look at this. By sprint 21, it was just mayhem. They had pulled out over 100% of everything that was in there. It was just a constant churn, in and out, in and out, in and out. So we met up with the product owner and began to reduce this, try and figure out what was going on. How do they get ahead of the team and start planning the work better, determining what their sprint goals were, and stopping with this horrible situation with stories. And that was very helpful. All right, we finally got them to improve. Here's another great story. Look at what's going on over here, boys and girls. Look at this. This is not a big team, but the team was beginning to learn. This was, again, the same company where they eliminated all the previous people, brought in new people, so they're trying to learn. The product owner really was ambitious. She wanted to get a lot of stuff done. And you can see that she was bringing in 88 points. And the team didn't feel confident yet to say, no, we can't do that. All right. The Scrum Master was a junior Scrum Master and was fearful and didn't have the chutzpah to say, we cannot accomplish 90 points. So what she did was, all right, well, let's try it. Let's see what happens. Sometimes you have to do that. I'm not saying she was wrong. Sometimes you have to let the team make the decision. If they say, well, yeah, well, let's see what happens. I think we can do it. And you go, are you sure? Yeah, we can do it. Let's watch and see. And this is where the metrics can give you some insights. And you can come back to the team and say, well, how did we do, team? Well, not so good. Not so good. All right. We took on 88 and only completed about 45. Next sprint, they took on 82 and only completed about 40. So finally, they said, guys, we got to stop doing that. So they figured that since they'd only completed about 40, the next sprint, they would take on the same amount. And guess what they did? They got that done and brought in some stretch goals. Now they're starting to figure out, okay, under commit and over deliver. Now, an interesting thing happens as if you watch this. Under commit, over deliver. Under commit, over deliver. This was a messed up sprint. Ignore it. Way under commit, way over deliver. But look at the pattern here of under committing and over delivering. By this point, I had to intercede again and say, hey guys, why is it that you are able to commit back here over to 40 points and you're look at your velocity, 39, 48, 37, 42, but you're committing to 28, 26. And this was what we discovered was, well, we were afraid we're going to get in trouble if our metrics look bad. You're not going to get in trouble if every now and then you overcommit. But this is ridiculous, right? It's ridiculous to have 200% of what you can do. That's just silliness. But a little bit of overcommitting is fine, right? You're stretching. But you have to balance that. Don't wear your team down. Don't exhaust them. So now what we did was we got them to begin to slow down to speed up, start figuring out what their actual velocity was, and they took on a few more here at sprint 44. All right? Under promise, over deliver. Under promise, over deliver. All right. And now they're getting closer. The percentage is closer. Instead of 140, 138% difference, look what happens over here. All right. Now it's closer to 106, 115 as they begin to stretch. And guess what? They get up to a 77-point velocity. See, they were actually holding themselves back here. The fear of abuse of metrics can actually hold a team back. And this is the evidence of that. They were so fearful of their forecasting and predictability metrics being hammered against them that they were holding back. And the reason for this is what happens when executives begin to demand that teams discuss their velocity and their predictability, and they do it in a way in which they don't understand. That's not helpful, boss. Stop doing that. Now, in this case, I will say that the team had misunderstood what the leadership was saying. They were not being threatened. They were not being bullied. They were not being beat up. They were being encouraged. But they'd taken it as, oh, we look bad if we don't. Once we got them over that, and I promised them, I will protect you. If you overcommit and underdeliver, and they ask questions, I will answer for you and make sure that they understand. Just leave them alone. Let them find their sweet spot here. Okay? This team then became one of the most famous teams in the company. Everybody thought these guys are just killing it, just crushing it. So you can see how emotions can actually slow you down. Fear, abuse of the metrics can slow you down. This team was originally a Kanban team, and they had a horrible reputation for not being able to deliver anything of quality or on time. Okay, so I observed for a few months, and I realized that they weren't even really doing Kanban. I mean, there was nothing they were doing in Kanban that was correct. There was no whip limits. The board itself was not clear. It wasn't well designed. They didn't have exit criteria. All right. They weren't collaborating. They weren't, slicing stories small so that they could create a flow. So I said, okay, I want to impose a Scrum process. You can do certain things as Scrum, certain things as Kanban. We're going to bring some of these things together, but we're going to actually have whip limits and a few other things. And they fought against that for a little bit. And you'll see that there's going to be a moment here where we discuss that. And you'll notice that in the very beginning, then you had this wacky success rate, sometimes 80%, down to 50%. Okay. And what we discovered was that they were really struggling to estimate their stories. They could not get along and agree upon the story sizes. Usually the developers would say it's a 2 or a 3, and the testers would say it's a 5 or an 8. And when we looked at the hours, I had them record the hours that they were putting in. The testers were 2 or 3 times. It took them 2 or 3 times the duration to test something that it took the developers. That was odd. Usually the ratio is 2 or 3 developers to 1 tester, because the time to test it is usually about half of what it takes to develop it. All right. And I know there's going to be some agilists out there having a heart attack right now and say, developers should be doing the yes, developers should be testing, but these guys did it. And they didn't want to do it, and it wasn't in their job description. And as consultants or contractors from a certain company, they were developers, not testers. And they didn't want to start testing because they saw that as a job, as a role that was actually beneath their station in life. I know that may sound alien to you, but that was the reality. And so they would often say, testing is for testers. Developers get paid more. This is what we do, and then we hand it off. So we're working through a lot of mindset issues here. Okay, try and get them to understand just because you do some testing doesn't make you less of a developer. It makes you more of a developer. We applied some WIP limits, clarified the exit criteria, clarified definition of done, clarified definition of ready, worked on the working agreement, redid their board so that we had more vertical columns because I wanted to see where the wait lanes were. I saw at one point there was over 40 stories stuck in test. And I said, well, what the heck's going on here? You're not testing all of those. What is in test and what's actually waiting? So we created some, waiting for test, waiting for approval, waiting to deploy, that kind of stuff. And then we began to identify, all right, what's happening in test? Then we met with some executives. We met with some local people. We fixed up. We had a terrible environment. That was causing some of the stress. The testers were trying to do a top quality job. They were scared to death of introducing defects into production. And as a result, they were actually over testing. So fear, again, strikes down the team. So once we introduced some automation tests and some other techniques, improved the quality of the environment, the data quality, so that they were convinced that their tests were reliable, they began to speed up. We also then helped to get the developers, once we got to our WIP limit, the developers would pivot and start helping to test. And we no longer had any queues of 40 items in a waiting status. So what was the result of that? Well, take a look for yourself, ladies and gentlemen. We went from 48 points of velocity to 108 points of velocity. Again, you doubled the velocity. It took a long time. You'll notice that this is 28 sprints. But in a year, we went from 48 points velocity to over 108. But we had to fix a lot of issues on this team. And you'll notice that in this case, I did something a lot of these guys say don't do. I imposed a framework on them. That's right. I sure did. And I'm proud of it because the framework they had did not serve the team well. And I helped to say, guys, this is not going to work. This is why. They came along as willing hostages, shall we say. Ultimately, this team became the #1 most praised team. They went from the worst to the one that everyone was so proud of because it was the turnaround story. This is the team that could. So there are times, guys, when you're coaching, when you want to be more robust and you want to drive that change because they don't understand what their own problems are. And I know some people say, oh, that's not good coaching. Well, there's the results right there. You see it? You see it? It can help. This is how I was able to convince the executives, show them this is the value I'm bringing. And guess what they said? Come back again next year. We love you. Okay, that's it. Thank you very much. Hope you enjoyed it. Put your comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe. If you disagree with me, let me know. All right? And if you agree with me, I would also appreciate if you let me know. But especially those of you who say, that was dumb. Don't do that. I want to hear that. Let's have a little conversation. All right. See you guys later. Bye.